Hey, welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you watched last week's video, you would have seen that I made myself a pair of corduroy dungarees and I saved the leftover fabric that I had. And in today's video, I am going to be showing you how I made these super cute little baby dungarees out of the leftover fabric. So these are the dungarees I made. It was actually really straightforward, especially once I'd made the adult ones as well. I made the pattern for them myself and I used the leftover corduroy fabric that I had from last week's project. Also, these buttons were cut off another shirt that I was cutting up, and then I've used poppers as well. So yeah, let's get into the video and I will show you how I made these little dungarees.
Okay, so because I've never actually made baby clothes before, I used this little secondhand dungarees as a reference for the size and the pattern pieces, etc. I also used some pattern paper, offcuts, some offcuts from the cord, a pencil, fabric scissors and paper scissors as well. So to begin with, I'm going to start with the back leg. So I'm just pinning that onto the pattern paper and getting that as flat as possible, and so I can follow where all the seams are. This little dungaree set is 0 to 3 months, and because I want to get more use out of them and hopefully be able to use them in the autumn, I want to make my dungarees slightly bigger and hopefully get them more towards like a 3 to 6 month size. So I'm just tracing around all the details on the back, the length, leg seams, etc., and then I'm just joining up all my line. And I'm going to add a 1.5 centimeter seam allowance as well. This will allow me space to be able to take it in and also to finish off the seams neatly. So I'm just taking a little bit of space off here because there was like an extra panel added for poppers in between the legs. So I'm using my pattern master to create the pattern as well as a pencil. And then I'm adding extra details like how many pattern pieces to cut and the name of the pattern piece, etc. Now for the back panel, again I'm just going to trace around this, and I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it on the fold to give me more chance of getting a accurate pattern piece. So I'm using my pattern master to create a straight line. I'm going to trace around the curved edge and measure the straight edge as well around the waist. Regularly I'm coming back and I'm measuring and I'm checking my measurements, and I'm checking that, for example, if I'm making the front top or the back top, it's going to fit back onto the back trousers. So I want to make sure that all my pattern pieces match up. Again, I'm going to add 1.5 centimeter seam allowance to this. Also, there's top stitching detailing on these little dungarees, and there's also top stitching detailing on my dungarees. So I'm just going to create kind of like a fake waistband and top stitch these bibs. So I'm cutting this panel on the fold so I won't add a seam allowance to that side, and then I'm just going to add 1.5 centimeter seam allowance all the way around to the other sides. And then once I've done that, I'm just measuring the button extension, which is on the back, and I'm going to create a separate little pattern piece for this. So this is basically just a rectangle that I'm going to fold in half, and that's going to attach to the side seam of the back trousers and the side seam of the back bib as well, which is going to give me a little bit of overlap to add those poppers in to the side. I'm going to cut a pair and then I'm going to fold it, so I'm doing double the width that I need. And now for the front bib, again using my pattern master to create a straight line and measuring as I go. These are really simple pattern pieces, so it was quite easy to create the pattern for this, but it was just checking to make sure that everything measured and matched up. Again, I created this pattern piece so it could be on the fold. When I actually came to cut out my fabric, I didn't have quite enough space to cut it on the fold, so I ended up adding a centimeter seam allowance and adding a seam down the center as well. And I think I'm going to add a little patch pocket on the front because I think that's really cute. So even though it's totally unnecessary, but yeah, I think I'm going to add a pocket onto the front bib as well. And again, I'm going to carry that top stitching to create that fake waistband across the front of the front bib. So I've also decided to leave off the belt loops and to just create like fake pockets at the side, because these are obviously totally unnecessary on baby garment. Yeah, I just decided not to create more work for myself and to just keep it quite simple. So now I'm just sketching out a little pocket. I've never made anything this small, so this might be quite fiddly. And now for the front legs as well. So again, the same with the back legs. I'm just going to pin them down as flat as I can on the pattern paper and try and trace around them, try and get as close to the seams as possible to get the shape. Starting off with a straight line at the bottom, and then I'm just marking through where the seam allowance would be. And there's slightly more of a curve on the front crotch seam as well, so I'm tracing that off. So then I'm joining up all my lines, and then I'm going to lay my back leg panel over the front panel just to check how the lengths are comparing, to check that they are similar lengths. So the back panel was a lot longer, so the back trouser leg was a lot longer, so I added a bit of extra height into the front trouser leg. And then I've decided to create a fake side pocket, so I'm cutting the shape of it into the front trouser leg, and then I'm just going to put another piece of fabric behind it and top stitch it down to give that effect of a pocket, which hopefully you will see what I mean in a minute. And now I'm just tracing over to get that angle of that front pocket, and then tracing the rest of the outline of the trouser leg. So once I've stitched this little triangle on, it'll create that full seam at the front. It'll also serve as a little facing for the poppers to go on as well. And then for the straps, so I just measured these straps, and I think they're about 5 centimeters wide. I'm just doing a rectangle with a fold in it for the straps, and then also for the separate facing for the poppers between the legs as well. I did just another straight rectangle. In hindsight, I possibly should have cut this on the bias so it had a bit more stretch, but I didn't. I just did it following the normal grain, so we will see how that turns out fit wise. So those are all my pattern pieces all ready to go. And yeah, now I'm making sure that the corduroy is, because it is a directional fabric, as I talked about in my last video, I'm making sure that all the pattern pieces are laid facing the same way. And because I don't have much of this fabric left, I'm just working out how best to lay all my pattern pieces to get the most out of the fabric. And unfortunately I wanted to cut the front bib on the fold as well, but I didn't quite have enough room, so I decided to just add a seam allowance to this, which was absolutely fine in the end. So once I've laid all my pattern pieces out, I'm just pinning them down and cutting them out. This project was a great way to use up all those scrap fabrics and also all those scrap pieces of pattern paper that I've been saving up as well, because there were lots and lots of tiny little pattern pieces. So first of all, before I even start sewing, I'm just going to pre-press all the pattern pieces that need pre-pressing. For example, the straps, I'm just pressing them over 1 centimeter and then pressing them in half so they're easy to just top stitch, and also pressing the edges of the pocket down. And also the facing for the poppers as well between the legs, I'm just pressing them in half. I just thought while I was at the iron I'd get all the pressing done at once. And I'm also pressing the edge of the fake pocket over on the front trouser legs as well, just over 1 centimeter, so I can top stitch this. So because this fabric has a nap to it, it has the raised nap of the corduroy, it actually sheds a lot of fibres as well. So obviously not really ideal for baby clothes, and I don't want it to be shedding little bits of fabric while the baby's wearing it. So what I have decided to do is to overlock most of my seams that will kind of be exposed to reduce the amount of fibres that are shredding off this fabric. So unfortunately the only overlocking threads I have at the moment is white, so I just decided to use this as you won't really see it, and I would just rather that these seams be really neat and tidy on the inside pre-overlocking. And then I'm going to use the same Scanfill organic thread in green that I used for the last set of dungarees. So this is the front bib, so I'm just sewing down the centre front of the front bib. As you can see, I've already overlocked the seams, and then I'm just trimming off a little bit of excess seam allowance so it's easier when I come to fold them down. And then I'm just top stitching down the seam allowance to one side, very much like I did on my own dungarees. And then I'm folding over the top and just stitching along the edge. So that's the top bib, and then I'm going to add the little pocket. So I'm stitching the top edge down, and then I'm going to pin that in place on the front bib. This is really fiddly because it was a tiny pocket, and it actually did end up slightly wonky, which, yeah, if I was inclined, I could have probably gone back and unpicked it and redone it, but I decided to just leave it as it was. So I'm just going to top stitch that pocket down now, just going around with my presser foot really close to the edge all the way around, and when I get to the end I'm going to pivot back round and go back round slightly less than a centimetre away from my first line to give 2 rows of top stitching around that pocket. So there we go, there's a little pocket done. And now I'm just going to create that fake pocket on the front trouser leg. So I'm just pinning that back in place so that the seams match up on the underneath part and the top part, and then I'm just going to top stitch along the edge of what would be my pocket opening to stitch that down. And because I've already overlocked the edge of the underneath layer, it's all nice and neat on the inside, so it gives the look of a pocket without the function of a pocket, because babies don't need pockets. And I'm going to do the same on the other side. Now I'm going to attach my front legs together with by the crotch seam, so just straight stitching around that, and then I will go back over the edge of that seam with the overlocker as well to keep that nice and neat and tidy. Also, one pattern piece I forgot to cut out was a fake fly, so I've just top stitched one onto the front legs so it looks like there is a fake fly there. So now I'm just going to overlock the edge of that seam just to make sure the seam is not shredding fibres. And I'm just pre-overlocking the back crotch seam as well. I'm also overlocking the inner leg on both front and back trouser legs. So yeah, all seams are just getting overlocked at this point. So now back to the front. Now I have sewn the trousers together, I can attach the front bib. So I'm going to line up the centre front seam allowances together, and then I'm just going to stitch along that waistline all the way to the edge. And now I'm just going to top stitch that fake waistband like I talked about when I was making the pattern. So in the end I think I just decided to go for 1 row of top stitching because I felt like I didn't have enough space to get 2 rows in. So now I'm just turning the edge over 1 centimetre and 1 centimetre again and top stitching, and carrying this on all the way down into that fake pocket on both sides. So I'm doing 2 rows of top stitching on both sides. Now that's the front of my little dungarees done, so I'm going to pop that aside and come back to the button extensions and the back panel. So I'm going to go straight ahead and stitch the back bib onto the back trousers all the way along, so top stitching all the seams up to the top bib. And now I'm going to add the little button extensions into the side. So I'm just tucking the top in and top stitching it, and the straps as well. I'm just turning the right sides together, stitching along one short edge 1 centimetre, then turning it through and top stitching down each side, so the straps are top stitched all the way around the edge to secure them. And I'm doing that on both straps. So I'm just trimming my seam allowance so when I turn it through it's not quite as bulky on that corner. So now my straps are ready. I'm going to attach the straps in the process of this as well. So I'm just leaving myself 2 centimetres at the side to be able to roll hem the edge of the top bib, and then I'm just pinning my straps down, and I'm just going to stitch them down as I stitch the top of the back bib over. So I think I did 2 rows of top stitching here to make them nice and secure. I'm just trimming off a little bit of that so when I fold them over it's not so bulky. So now I'm just going to roll hem that curved edge, which I've already pressed with the iron, which makes it a lot easier. So I'm going to do 2 rows of top stitching here as well. And then once I've top stitched that edge over, I'm going to add the button extensions, pinning them all the way up to the edge of the top bib and down into the trousers, and just stitching them onto the back trouser leg. So the first one I had to unpick because I'd actually positioned it a little bit too low down, so I just unpicked it and placed it a bit higher up. Now once the button extensions are in place, I can stitch the front trouser leg to the back trouser, just on the outer leg seams. So I'm not going all the way up to the waist, but I want to make sure that I'm coming up as far as to catch the edge of the button extension and the edge of the fake pocket, so that they can overlap and I can popper them together. And then once I've done the sides, I'm just stay stitching the button extension, and then I'm just catching the bottom of the button extension with the front trouser leg, just about 1 centimetre at the bottom. So next up, let's do the buttonholes in the front of the top bib. So I've got a buttonhole foot on my machine. I'm just going to test it on a scrap piece of the same fabric, and I've also measured my button to see how long my buttonhole should be. So I'm going to test that length out first on the scrap fabric before I do any stitching on my actual garment. So I'm just snipping that buttonhole open, and then I'm going to test pushing the button through it. Should go through with a little bit of resistance. You don't want it to go through too easily, and you obviously want to be able to get it through. So once I'm happy with that length, I'm going to go ahead and do my buttonholes. So my machine has like a 4-step buttonhole setting, which is really, really helpful. So I'm just doing 2 buttonholes on the sides of the front bib. And then I'm just going to stitch the popper extensions onto the inner legs and hem the trousers as well. I'm matching up the centre of the seams together for stitching them down. And then to hem these trousers, I'm just folding the fabric over 1 centimetre and 1 centimetre again at the bottom, and then just stitching along the edge, trimming down any bulky seam allowances that are in my way as I go. So that is the popper extensions. So hopefully they will sit nice and flat together. And now to add the wooden buttons onto the edge of the straps as well. So obviously I don't exactly know the fit of these dungarees at the moment, so I've just added the buttons onto the end of the strap, and the buttons are fairly easy to move in the future if I need slightly longer straps or slightly shorter straps. So I've just stitched them onto the end for now. And now I'm going to add poppers. So I'm using my tailor's awl to push a hole through the fabric where I want to have the poppers, through both layers of the fabric where the top part of the popper and the bottom popper will go. And then these poppers that I just have these like little tools to hammer them down as well. So that's just what I'm doing now. So there's like 4 little parts to them. So I'm doing 2 poppers on each side of the dungarees, and then I think I added 5 poppers into the inner leg of the dungarees as well. So once I've done the poppers, I'm going to give the dungarees a final press and neaten up any seams on the inside that might have extra threads on them or anything, and then they are done. And there we go, there are my finished dungarees, and I have this super cute little stripy top that I brought from eBay, which I figured would go perfectly with them. So yeah, the little poppers at the side and poppers through the inner leg as well. So hopefully they should be fairly easy to get on. I'm really happy with how they turned out.
Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it, and if you have any more baby clothes tips for me, please let me know, because as I said, this is the first time I have made anything for babies or children. I would love to know your tips and any ideas for more things that I can make. I am really happy with them, so I'm excited to try and make more things, and also I'm excited to match in our dungarees. So yeah, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, leave me a comment to let me know what you thought, and subscribe to my channel so you never miss another video like this. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to find out more about Agnes London, you can check out my website www.agneslondon.com, or you can follow me on Instagram at Agnes LDN for more info and updates. And I'll be back next week with another video.